In the world of multinational corporations, there's a constant high-stakes game being played with literally trillions of dollars. It's a world of super sophisticated strategies, all designed to navigate these incredibly complex international tax rules. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and unravel a financial mystery that shows you exactly how it all works. And at the heart of our story is this really fascinating puzzle. How did one of the most famous, or infamous, corporate tax loopholes, the double Irish, morph into something called the single malt? I know, the names sound like they're from a spy movie, or maybe a whiskey tasting, but they represent a deeply controversial cat-and-mouse game between global companies and the governments trying to tax them. So, our mystery starts with the end of an era. We're talking about a tax strategy so effective at legally wiping out tax bills on billions in profit that it became a household name, at least in financial circles. But its days were numbered. Okay, so what was this double Irish? Well, the idea behind it was actually pretty simple, but incredibly powerful. A company would set up two different Irish subsidiaries. One of them would hold all the valuable stuff, the patents, the software code, the brand names. The second company, while it was technically incorporated in Ireland, was physically managed from a tax haven, like Bermuda. And that little trick made its profits effectively stateless, completely invisible to tax authorities. Billions in profit, shielded from tax. But the world started to catch on. A huge wave of international pressure began to build. The OECD launched its base erosion and profit shifting project. Everyone just calls it BEPs. And it was a massive global effort aimed squarely at stopping this kind of profit shifting. Then the EU jumped in with new rules, and finally, Ireland itself changed its own laws to shut the door. The party was officially over. So, with their number one strategy being phased out, starting in 2015, what were these massive corporations going to do? They needed a replacement, and they needed one fast. And this is where our story takes a really interesting turn. This quote pretty much says it all, right? It gets to the very core of this whole dynamic. The end of the double Irish didn't stop the game. It just changed the rules of engagement. So corporate tax advisors, they got right to work and cooked up this elegant evolution of the old strategy, the single malt. Now, the single malt was different in a few really key ways. First off, instead of needing two Irish companies, it only required one, much cleaner. And rather than relying on a classic tax haven, it cleverly used Ireland's existing tax treaties with other countries, in this case, Malta. The results? A much simpler, more streamlined setup, but one that was just as brutally effective. So how did this clever new scheme actually work? Let's pop the hood and dissect the single malt to see exactly what made it tick. It was this precise four-step dance. Okay, step 1, an Irish company holds the valuable IP. Step 2, its key management, the people making the big decisions, are physically located in Malta. Step 3, and this is the kicker, a specific rule in the tax treaty between Ireland and Malta meant the company was now a tax resident of Malta, not Ireland. And finally, thanks to Malta's own tax rules on certain types of foreign income, all those global profits flowing into the company were taxed at a rate super close to zero. And the final outcome was exactly the same as its predecessor. The single malt once again created that stateless income, profits that just exist in this legal limbo, piling up with almost no tax liability whatsoever. It was a direct and really potent replacement for the double Irish. But this new workaround? Well, it wasn't destined to last. That cat and mouse game was accelerating, and this time around, regulators were able to spot and close these gaps much, much faster. I mean, this timeline really tells the whole story. The single malt pops up around 2015, right as the double Irish is fading out. But look, just 3 years later, in 2018, Ireland and Malta amend their treaty, specifically to kill it. Then comes the final blow. By 2023, the OECD's global minimum tax makes the whole idea of a zero tax structure almost impossible. That window of opportunity was incredibly short. So yeah, the single malt wasn't defeated by just one thing. It was a coordinated global effort. You had direct treaty amendments, major U.S. tax reforms targeting foreign profits, that massive OECD global minimum tax project, and brand new transparency rules forcing companies to actually report where they make their money. The walls were closing in from every single side. So with both the double Irish and the single malt now pretty much in the history books, what does this all mean for the future? Has the game of corporate tax avoidance finally been won? Well, not exactly. 15%. This is the new magic number in international tax. The OECD's agreement sets up a 15% global minimum corporate tax rate. And this is a huge deal. It's a landmark achievement designed to finally end the race to the bottom, where countries just compete by offering lower and lower tax rates. It fundamentally changes the whole incentive to shift profits around. But the game isn't over. It's just gotten more subtle. Instead of creating these complex, stateless companies, firms are now using more nuanced strategies. Things like shifting the value of assets like brand names to low-tax countries, or strategically redesigning their supply chains to make sure profits land where they'll be taxed the least. The goal's the same, but the methods are way more refined. Which brings us right to our final question. This whole cycle, from double Irish to single malt to global reforms, it shows that the tax authorities, the CAT, they're getting way faster and much more coordinated. But corporate ingenuity, the mouse, is incredibly resilient. So the real question for the future is, can these global rules ever truly get ahead of corporate innovation, or is the mouse always destined to be one step ahead?